Yo, what's good, everyone? Alex Trataros here with another Knicks episode of the Knicks Jets Etc. podcast. And with me today is my buddy, my coach, my pal, the man with the plan, myself. I am once again solo dolo on this podcast. There's no John Meleka, there's no Greg tonight as well. It's just me being the only one giving you the update or updates, I should say, on what's happening with the New York Knicks. So, guys, there's a lot going on. So let's get into it. Cut the chase. So let's start off with the news with Kemba Walker, because Kemba Walker, as we all know, did not play last week against the Oklahoma City Thunder. During warmups, he was concerned that he had tweaked his knee, and the Knicks, to be on the safe side, they decided to pull him out, give him some rest for a couple of days, did some scans on him. Test came back negative. Everything is fine with his knee. We know that he has arthritis, so he's going to feel some pain from time to time. It's going to feel uncomfortable, stuff along those lines. And he is fine. So I expect him to be back in the lineup at some time in the near future. Since nothing's wrong, it's all based on comfort for him and when he's able to play. You saw him on the sidelines today when the Knicks were playing against the Indiana Pacers, and he looked, once again, engaged with what was going on with the team, giving high fives and whatnot, cheering his teammates on. So I expect him to come back once he's ready to play within the next few days or so. Also, big news: everyone is out of health and safety protocols. We got Julius Randle, who got out of it today and was able to play. Played over 35 minutes today, coming his first day back from health and safety protocols. We had Mitch Jericho Sims available. Nerlens Noel came out. Although Nerlens didn't play today, he came out with Randall today, but he was a late scratch. But didn't matter. Taj and more so Mitch, they played really well today. And yeah, so everyone's out of health and safety protocols. Everyone's back on the team. Hopefully this is the last the Knicks will have to deal with it. We do know that COVID is still going on and rates are increasing during during the winter. So we'll see. Hopefully these guys stay safe and we can have them on the court. That way the Knicks continue to make that playoff push, whether it's being in the top 6 or being in that 7 to 10 range and making the play-in and still making it into the playoffs if they win that game. So thankfully they're all back, healthy. Nerlens Noel was out for a little longer. He may have handled it. He may have had a more severe case of COVID, so it may take him some time to get back in there as well. So, but like I said, thankfully all these guys are back on the team, and these guys are trending in the right direction to get back on the court. Other news that we had: the Knicks were involved in a 3-way deal with the Los Angeles Lakers, the Cleveland Cavaliers, and the Cavs were able to get Rajon Rondo. So let me start. Actually, let me pull this one back. Let me pull this one back and discuss what the deal was. The Knicks decided to get in on this deal just to essentially get some money and nothing more than that. The 3-team deal involved the Lakers getting rights to Luis Labayer, which was one of the Knicks players that we acquired, and a international player that we had rights to that wasn't on the roster. Cavs get Rajon Rondo, as I said, and the Knicks got Denzel Valentine, draft rights to Wayne Zeeland and Brad Newley, and cash considerations, which is $1.1 million. The Knicks then, the same day, which was yesterday, on Monday, they decided to cut Denzel Valentine. So all they have right now is the $1.1 million in cash considerations. Wayne Zeeland and Brad Newley as the stash players, international, because they're international, so they're not going to take any roster positions. But if the Knicks do want to bring them over at some point in the future, they'd obviously have to just create a roster spot, and they could bring these guys over if they feel like they're going to be a good addition to the team. Just like Rokas Jokubaitis. That's essentially what those guys are. And so that was the news for the Knicks and what they were involved in. I think the main thing was that they get $1.1 million in cash considerations. It was just a deal for the Lakers to get rid of the Denzel Valentine contract, to free it up, because his contract becomes fully guaranteed on January 10th. Same day as Wayne Selden, who they cut Wayne Selden to get Denzel Valentine and then cut Denzel Valentine. And now the player that it looks like they're trying to get is, I'm going to butcher this name, and I wish my boy John Meleka was here because he's usually better than this at this than I am. Ryan Arcidiacono. Okay, I'm butchering it to the living to the 10th degree. But the Knicks were trying to get him on a 10-day contract, and it may have been him that they're trying to use for the last roster spot because, as we see, we're down point guards. We're down to Miles Deuce McBride, Emmanuel Quickly. Derrick Rose is still out for some time as his ankle heals up. Kemba Walker with his knee. You don't know if he's always going to be available. So it looks like the Knicks are just trying to add point guard depth. That way, that just simple. That way, they're not out there without someone who can command the offense. And not saying that Ryan's going to be this saving grace to now be the point guard that we've been looking for all these years. But you just want to have depth, just break glass in case of emergency. Something like Jarrett Jack was supposed to be, but Jarrett Jack then became the starting point guard, even though that wasn't the real intention. So that's all the news for the New York Knicks. Now to catch up on what happened today, we had the New York Knicks play the Indiana Pacers. And guys, this was a wire-to-wire game, very electric. You have Julius Randle making his return after being on health and safety protocols. Same thing with Mitchell Robinson. Finally, we get a healthy team where we're not just struggling to get up points on the board, because as we saw against the Oklahoma City Thunder and as we saw against the Toronto Raptors, this team, when it doesn't have Julius Randle or any of the other vets, and you're just relying strictly on the young guys, it is very tough for them to be successful. These guys, as of right now, none of them are in that stratosphere as like John Morant, who's just killing it in this league right now. Not even on the same level as Jason Tatum. These guys are role players. They are limited. They don't have the skill sets to make a major impact. And when we saw that no one was really commanding a double team like Julius Randle was, or even Kemba Walker. No one was really able to take advantage of one-on-one matchups and knock down shots, even when they had open looks, and they got a lot of open looks from three. They weren't able to knock it down, and this team, without those guys, just didn't look confident to have a diverse offense. It was either three or driving it to the rack, and there was very little in between of finding a mid-range jumper, and you need that three level of scoring to be an effective team. They just didn't have it, and it's fine. They're young. We shouldn't be expecting these young guys to come out here and kill it like straight from the get-go, because once again, they are young. They are entering the league. They are rookies. Like anyone in their life, if you're starting something new or just taking to another level, a professional level, even if you're starting a new job, right? It takes some time for you to get comfortable in that role, even though if you have that type of experience. So same thing applies for these guys. It will take time for them to be more comfortable and to see who they truly are as NBA players. They're still very raw. You still see the flaws, whether it's decision making from IQ playing the point guard position, Deuce McBride when it comes to staying with his guy for team defense, not necessarily on ball, but just when he's off ball. And you see all these flaws just glaring when you're missing your veterans. So it was rough to watch, especially that Raptors game. My goodness, that was tough. And I was even talking about that with Greg the other day. It was just so miserable, man. It was just really miserable. I really don't want to get into it because it was just such a bad game. Like, you saw RJ trying to get to the rack and he was struggling because the Raptors do have a really good defense. Then you see Fred VanVleet, Pascal Siakam going out there. Alec Burks was, trying to get something going, but he was in foul trouble. It could have been a lot worse. Gary Trent Jr. got in foul trouble as well, and he was out of the game quick. I think if he was in there, it would just been. It was a blowout. It would have been a worse blowout. Like thankfully he did get into foul trouble. It looked, the numbers don't give the indication that was that bad, but it was that bad. But getting to this game now, thankfully, we have our veterans back. Thankfully, Julius Randle was able to come back today. And it's just been a wild week, 2 weeks on Twitter, because we know Julius Randle hasn't been playing well. We know this team overall has been playing well. We know that there's a lot of issues with this team. And it's concerning, especially when you watch this team exceed expectations from last season, become that 41 win team, get the 4th seed in the Eastern Conference, host the first round of the playoffs against the Atlanta Hawks. Even though we lost and we won one game, it raised the bar. And so people came into the season with higher expectations. And with those raised expectations, people were expecting, a 1-year trajectory where it's like, okay, we won 41 games. Now let's go win 45 more games. Let's go back to being, 4th. Maybe you take a drop to the 5th seed, but we're still a dominant team. We still come out with the defense. Doesn't always work that way, especially when you tinker with the roster. And they didn't even tinker with the roster that much. It's just replacing Elfrid Payton and Reggie Bullock. And I say that doesn't seem like that much, but in reality, I think Reggie Bullock was the bigger change than obviously Elfrid Payton. I think if we have Reggie Bullock in this team, a true 3-and-D guy, allow RJ Barrett to be that second, third option in the fold with Kemba, this team's a lot different. And we saw something like that tonight without Kemba, and you have Alec Burks in there. But you see when you give RJ touches, he's able to thrive. But getting back to what I was saying, this team just raised expectations, and it's just been tough for everyone. Even myself, as I'm still a fan. I try to come in here cool, calm, and collected to give a good analysis and not just be all heart. There is going to be some heart. I try to give it more of logic as to what's going on, but I'd be lying to say it was enjoyable, especially this past week when you see ugly basketball against the Detroit Pistons and Minnesota Timberwolves, where you look at this team on paper and they're supposed to be beating this team, especially when it's the Timberwolves who only have Malik Beasley out there. And then you look at the Detroit Pistons and it's really like a G League roster that they're running out. It's totally infuriating and totally justifiable to be angry and upset with this team when they should be knocking these type of teams out and not taking anyone lightly, because the East has gotten much tougher. And since it's gotten much tougher, you have to compete on a night in, a night out basis in order to make the playoffs, in order to stay competitive, in order to keep building on the success that you had last season. And that's where the frustration comes in. And what we've seen this entire season, even when you lose to the Orlando Magic and you have someone like Wendell Carter just going to town on Julius Randle, and Julius Randle not taking advantage of being matched up against Wendell Carter or taking advantage of all the mismatches, that's where the frustration comes in. So it's totally understandable. But with that, there has to be some level of expectation that progress isn't always linear. There will be bumps in the road. Some teams aren't going to go back to where they were the season before. And I'll look at the Milwaukee Bucks, right? When the Raptors won the championship that year, Bucks went to the Eastern Conference Finals. They lost, but they went to the Eastern Conference Finals. Following year, they get beat by the Miami Heat in the first round. Last year, they come back and they win it all. Now, one could say, well, and they had Mike Budenholzer on the hot seat. But that's just an example for a team that's in playoff contention that is not going to be the same every single year. It gets more frustrating when you're like the Philadelphia 76ers and you keep getting to that same spot and you're not pushing past it, where they keep getting to the second round and they keep choking. But I'm not here to discuss that. I'm just trying to set expectations to how this team is going to look moving forward. And for this team, they may have exceeded. They definitely did exceed expectations of making it to the 4th seed. But this season, at the beginning, I was thinking 5, 6. I think I said 6 seed because of all the teams that you had to consider who'd be better above them. If they get to a play-in, it's not a lost season. It's still progress of showing being competitive, creating a winning culture, all of those things, and getting opportunities. And it's still laying that foundation and groundwork, not only for the veterans on this team like Julius Randle, but it's also showing RJ Barrett, Mitchell Robinson, Quentin Grimes, Deuce McBride, Obi Toppin, Emmanuel Quickly, all those guys, Jericho Sims, what it takes to be a winning team. Okay. It's very difficult to be a winning team, and they have to know the work that goes into it to just see success. So, we can look at the Sacramento Kings who are constant losers. We can look at the New Orleans Pelicans, who they haven't been doing so well either. You can look at the Houston Rockets, who are going through turmoil right now after the James Harden trade. And I use the Kings more so as a better example because they've had consistent years of just underachieving. But just to show that young teams without any true veterans and any true guidance, it's difficult to create a winning culture. It's just very difficult. And you can go back to the Brooklyn Nets when they had D'Angelo Russell, Joe Harris, Jarrett Allen, Karis LeVert. Like, it took Kenny Atkinson 3 years, really, to get that team up to snuff. And it takes time, but no one wants to see a losing product. And to have a winning product during a rebuild, and I'll get into more like what the Knicks are doing with their rebuild, because I did touch on that on Knicks Fan TV. We should want to see this team win. We shouldn't want to see this team lose, because it's hard for players mentally to continuously lose and feel like they can stay within that same situation and build on top of it. All right. But I've buried the lead long enough. Let's talk about this really good Indiana Pacers game. This Knicks defeating the Indiana Pacers today. But before I do that, guys, you know what time it is. Yeah, you all know. Gotta take care of the bills around here. Got to do this live ad read. It's been fun doing these live ad reads. I will say that. All right, guys. So you know the spiel. This podcast is partnered with Fansided, and Fansided is owned by Minute Media. And Minute Media also owns the Players Tribune, Derek Jeter's publication that he started, where you get to hear the storytelling of sports through the athlete's perspective. Well, the Players Tribune has launched its first ever mental health podcast called Blindsided. It's hosted by former NHL goalie Corey Hirsch and psychiatrist Dr. Diane McIntosh. This show will share the moments for a variety of athletes when everything changed for them and mental health became the most important focus of their lives. It allows listeners to have an understanding of the different types of mental health challenges people face. Whether that's PTSD, addiction, sudden life changes, insecurity, or even just mental breakdowns in general. That's what this podcast gets into. And they've had guests such as Kevin Love, Paul Bissonnette, and Kurt Warner come on the show to discuss how they overcame their mental health, some of these mental health issues, and how they continue to overcome it and work with it, because it just doesn't end right there sometimes. So guys, make sure to go over to the Players Tribune, check out Blindsided. Like I said, the first ever mental health podcast. Doing great work over there. All right, now let's get into this game, because this game, like I said, was electric. It was wire to wire, a lot of fun, especially if you're a Knicks fan and you get to see them defeat the Indiana Pacers, our long rivaled foes. The New York Knicks defeat the Pacers 104-94, like a true grudge match that we always have against the Pacers. The Pacers always give us a rough time, really going back to, just the Reggie Miller, Patrick Ewing eras, those 90s, that 90 Knicks Pacers matchups. That's kind of what we get. These teams are very similar once again, where they're both looking to figure out their identity. They're both looking to get back on track, both looking to string some wins to get into the top 6 or even a play-in, just to show some growth and development. And that's what we got right here. And for the Knicks, they came out. Like I said, we got the starting lineup of Alec Burks, Evan Fournier, RJ Barrett, Julius Randle, Taj Gibson. Like I said, Randle and Mitch were back off of, and Jericho Sims were all back off of health and safety protocols. So they were all available for this game today. But that starting five really carried most of the load today. Julius Randle, RJ Barrett. RJ Barrett just came out of the gate hot, 6 for 6. He was just torching the Pacers. Okay. RJ finished the game with 32 points. Julius Randle supplementing his RJ's hot style of play today with 30 points as well. They both go from the field 12 out of 20. You have RJ hitting going 2 for 5 from three. You have Randle going 2 for 7 from three. Both of them hitting their free throws today. Both of them missed 2 shots. RJ went 6 for 8 from the free throw line. Randle went 4 from 6 from the free throw line. But these guys were killing it today, giving you the offense and the defense and the playmaking that we all want these guys to do. This is the level of play we need from these two guys for the New York Knicks to take that next jump. We saw it last season too, guys. We saw it last season too when RJ and Randle are playing well. Sure, this is the first time they both had 30 plus points in the same game, which is what we need to see for this team to, like I said, to take the next step. But we've seen these two guys play well together last season, whether it was just RJ hitting threes, playing decent defense, finishing decently last season. Not great. He's finishing much better this season when he's getting into rhythm. And you just see that translation. Like I was saying, whether it was RJ playing 3 and D, predominantly 3 and D last season, and Randle being the catalyst, if RJ can be that guy where he can add to his game and do what he's doing, finish consistently at the rack, being able to change gears, play solid defense, hit some threes, and get a mid-range going, which he was getting his mid-range jumper going today. If he can do all of that and help Randle, this team takes another step, and we need both of these guys, like I said, to take that next step. Randle came back off of health and safety protocols. He was talking to Rebecca today and saying like how he was able to clear his mind. Rebecca Harlow, that is, the sideline reporter for the New York Knicks. He was saying how it cleared his mind being away from the game. Hopefully that's the case because, we did hear him say that he found the joy back in the game when the Knicks defeated the Atlanta Hawks on Christmas Day and you had Kemba who went for a triple-double. But hopefully this is here to stay because we need these two guys. But going down the list, we also got Alec Burks, who was giving us some Michael Jordan-esque. You had to see it in the fourth quarter. He had the slight push-off, stopped on a dime, hit that right elbow jumper mid-range, and drained it. Burks was in his bag today. Taj gave you a little bit of work. He was getting burned by Miles Turner today. Not really a good matchup, but I understand why Tiz wanted to go with it. You're bringing Mitch back in from health and safety protocols. You could say, hey, want to work him back in since he's been out for a little bit. Also, Mitch hasn't been great against centers who are 3-point threats. So maybe having him come off the bench when Turner was out and then giving him that capability to still be energized to guard Turner down the stretch. That seemed like to be the plan today for having Mitchell Robinson come off the bench today. And it worked because Mitch was killing it today. He had 8 points, went 4 for 5 from the field. He didn't really, he did well on the boards. He got 8 rebounds. Nothing too crazy like we've seen him go in double digits, but he was good on the offensive glass, getting putbacks, good on the defensive boards as well, snatching clutch defensive rebounds. Mitch was good, and he was also once again altering those shots. That is the whole point of Mitchell Robinson, to protect the paint, and we were missing that too when against the Toronto Raptors. So he came out here, was altering shots, giving some solid defense, and then we also had some good minutes from Quentin Grimes, giving you solid defense as well. Manuel Quickley was good today. You can look at the stat sheet, see that he got a plus 12. Manuel Quickley has really improved floor game wise. And I say that when floor game means like playmaking, passing, playing defense, hustle, like that's all there. That is all there. He went 4 for 4 from the free throw line as well. He got you 11 points. His overall shooting, though, it's been struggling. And I wrote about this for Hoops Habit when I was writing over there. Quickly came out of college being a streaky shooter where there will be 5 games in a row that he's just ice cold. And then there'll be another 5 games after that where he's just nuclear. And that type of inconsistency is, players can overcome that. It just takes work and Quickly still developing his game. But it takes time to overcome that. The thing about that is that if he's going to be so inconsistent, yes, you have to respect his 3-point shot because you never know when it's going to start raining, but it's hard to put him into a starting rotation when he doesn't offer a lot of downhill attacking, which is what Tibbs wants from his point guard. And when Kemba's here, Kemba's been doing that when he was on the hot streak. So it's very hard to put quickly into that starting rotation. Granted, Tibbs should have done that to make it more comfortable for Obi Toppin since they do have a connection. But it's hard to rely on quickly as a starting point guard if he's not giving you that type of play. That's why he works so well off the bench. He can play against lesser guys. He can get his shots going. You can pair him with Deuce McBride, who's slightly better at going downhill. But that's the reason why you see him coming off the bench. And then you had Obi Toppin, who got very little minutes today. I wish he was able to get more, but Randle had it going, so I totally understand that. And then McBride got very little minutes today. Understand that too, because you have Burks, who was actually playing pretty effectively at the point guard position. So I totally get that. And the Knicks needed to get a win after 2 losses and needed to get back on track. They couldn't afford to really lose this game because this week, when I get into it later, this is a week for them to really get back on point. And if you noticed, as I'm talking about everybody, there's one person that I didn't mention that actually contributed today. And that's because he didn't. Funny enough, he was able to switch the stat line around, and that is one Evan Fournier. Evan Fournier had 20 points against the Toronto Raptors, empty 20 points, and had no rebounds, no assists, no steals, no blocks, no nothing. This game, he decides to put up a goose egg in points and gets you 1 rebound, 2 assists, and 1 steal. Gave you a little bit of something, but not enough. And honestly, the Evan Fournier experience has to come to an end. I should say it should come to an end. I'm not in the front office. I can't make that decision, but it should come into an end. But before I get into that, let me finish up this game about the Pacers. Guys, watching this game, key things I got to discuss from this game. Randle loves matching up against Domantas Sabonis. I do not know what Sabonis did to Randle. It must have been talks of him should arguably be over Randle for being an all-star. Maybe that's it from last season, but I have no idea what Sabonis has done to Randle or what he said to Randle or what beef they have, because every single time they play against each other, Randle just sees blood. Like, he really just wants to go at some. I really want to know what it is against Domantas Sabonis that Randle looks at him and he's like, I got to beat the living crap out of you every single time I see you. Because that is the mentality this man has. And that is probably why he came back. He was energized, ready to go, dropped 30 points. And I was like, yeah, remember who's the true all-star around here. Granted, Sabonis got the last laugh last game. But now the Knicks are – is this the last matchup? This might have been the last matchup of the season for the Knicks and the Pacers. And if so, they tied at 2-2. Yeah, I think this is the last one. This is the last one. Yeah, guys, this is the last matchup between the Knicks and the Pacers. And they end the season being 2-2. But once again, like I said, Julius Randle just has a thing against Domantas Sabonis. I find it entertaining. I wish Randle had this type of anger towards everybody, because I would love to see what he would do on a nightly basis if he was just angry at the entire NBA. And he should be, because I feel like he gets disrespect. He gets properly guarded, but I feel like he gets some slight and not a lot of recognition, especially when you watch last season's NBA All-Star. They rarely passed him. And I think that should be burning in his brain and wanting to be like, I deserve my respect. But anyway, it's just funny that he goes at it like that. Another key takeaway that I wanted to take away from this game is that Knicks winning this, they're now 18-20. They're 2 games out of being 500. But they're also, as these standings try to load for me. Sorry, guys, my computer's a little wonky. These guys are a half a game out of being in the 10th spot, being in the play-in, and they are 3 games out being in the 6th, which is owned by the Cleveland Cavaliers, or 21-17. Guys, this is what I'm saying. Like this stretch right here is very, very interesting for the New York Knicks. This upcoming slate of games, and I'll get into like my takes for the upcoming, but the Knicks right now, they really need to go. They really need to go on a winning streak, or not even like a. They have to win a lot of games. That how about I put it that way? They don't need to go on a massive winning streak, although it would be nice. But they need to start winning some games because it is getting tight out here against in the Eastern Conference. If the Knicks fall too far back, this could be a lost season. So they have to make sure that they're taking advantage of all of these light games that they have, these winnable games. So, up next, you have 2 games against the Boston Celtics, one at MSG, one at TD Garden. Then they get the San Antonio Spurs, they get the Dallas Mavericks, they get the Atlanta Hawks, Charlotte Hornets, the Minnesota Timberwolves, New Orleans Pelicans. Though that stretch right there, those 8 to 9 games, they need to come out. They need to come out winners. Like they need to win like 6, in my opinion. They need to win 6 of those games because that will put them in position to take on the grueling West Coast trip that is coming up in February, where they have to face, they'll have to face. No, it's not a full West Coast trip, but they'll start off with a rematch against the Memphis Grizzlies at home, but then they're going out to the West Coast where they have to face the Lakers, which is a winnable game. The Lakers are trash, but they get the Utah Jazz, who's a good team. Denver, we just have a difficult time taking on Denver. I expect that to be a loss. The Golden State Warriors, who is looking ready to make another title run. Portland Trailblazers, they can go off. So that gauntlet right there in February, like it's going to be difficult for the Knicks if they can keep up this inconsistent style of play, because these teams, even though they're struggling out in the West Coast, these are teams that can easily, that I have more faith in them winning than the Knicks, just because even though they've been inconsistent, they have players that are top echelon of play, right? We can look at the Lakers. Like they have LeBron James. If Anthony Davis comes back then, that's tough. That is tough to match up. Even though we competed well with them last season, having to go against LeBron and AD, like that is a tough matchup. Then you talk about Donovan Mitchell and the Utah Jazz, who just plays great team basketball. Very difficult. Denver Nuggets, Jokic. They're expecting Jamal Murray could be back in February. If they're both back, good Lord, man, that is just a dynamic duo that has a lot of offensive firepower. That's very hard to stop. Golden State Warriors, Klay Thompson is going to be back. You can just chalk that one up as an L. You're going to have the gang back all together. No, rich getting richer at that point. Trailblazers, they've been down this season. That's a team that we could beat. But Dame Lillard, CJ McCollum, those are guys that can go off. And the only person that we have right now that we can that should be relied on, who hasn't been consistent, is Julius Randle. And essentially where I want to go with this game, guys, is that it's when you look at the schedule ahead, the Knicks need to, like I said, they need to take care of this upcoming 8 to 9 games, because it will just set them up to be better, and it will help them get into rhythm to take on these challenging teams when that part of the schedule comes up. All right. Another thing I want to get into is that even though with this electric win, it's really, like I talked about, like setting expectations, and it comes back to expectations once again with what are we going to get moving forward, because we see RJ and Randle go at it, and they played really well today. Like this team played well today. But which team are we getting the next day? They haven't really, outside of the 5-1 beginning of the season, they really haven't strung together consistent games of solid play where you're like, all right, I know I'm getting here. We could win these games. We could be in this one. They haven't done that. And even though I'm excited and this was an electric win and I love it, essentially Randle coming back and everyone you have Randle and RJ just putting up great performances. Like, how can you not be hyped? I just don't know what I just don't know what we're getting the next game. And that's concerning. Like, that is the concerning part of this. And since we don't know what we're getting the next game, this is where you have to set expectations and you're like, could we potentially are we going to get a good performance? Are we going to get a bad performance? And I say this too, just so that we can stop the whole, Randall's trash or RJ's trash, because everyone's just ready to blame somebody for why the season's going haywire, where there's a lot of issues for this team. We can go that Randle hasn't played up to the level of play that we should have had from him. RJ hasn't fully been playing up to the level of play that we've had from him. Evan Fournier hasn't played up to the level of play with his contract that he's been given. Kemba Walker has been a slight disappointment because of his knee and just having a rough start. Who knows? These guys can all turn around, but all the stuff that I'm laying, Thibodeau's rotations have been questionable and they've been underwhelming. You have the young kids where they're just going through the normal progression of developing, where you're not getting the constant parade of threes or that you would get from Emmanuel quickly. Sure, you've seen Obi Toppin take that next step, but when you put him out there in a starting rotation to be that guy, that creator for this team, he just can't do it. There's a lot of issues. We don't even have Derrick Rose right now. There's so much going on for this team. And it's tough. And when you don't have especially when you don't have your top player, and this is why Julius gets a lot of the heat, when you don't have your top player playing well, it's hard to know what you're going to get on a night-to-night basis. And that's what I'm saying, temper. And that's, I guess, where I'm coming to say, temper expectations for this team. Like, really, really temper expectations for this team after an electric win. Going to the next one against the Celtics, which is on Thursday. We don't know what we're going to get. Hopefully they come out and give us another good performance, but nothing's guaranteed. So enjoy these wins because they're fun. We obviously love seeing our team win. It's an electric feeling. But don't be surprised if this team goes back and starts to struggle. I'm getting you all ready because we've seen it happen already. Okay. Next thing I want to get up is this Evan Fournier. It's Evan Fournier nonsense, man. I talked about it because I talked about it last week on the last Knicks pod because we brought it up because on Knicks Fan TV, CP, JD, and myself were discussing, we trade JD and I were on the same camp where we'd trade 2 second rounders for Evan Fournier. And CP was saying you hold on because you can get more value for him. I am not seeing that. Fournier is not a fit for this team. He's not helping this team. He's not giving you defense. He was supposed to come here, give you some shot creation, some playmaking, and some team defense. We're not getting team defense. We're getting very little playmaking. We're not getting shot creation. We're not even getting a 3-point specialist. His numbers will probably be there. I'm not going to lie, because it just will, because he'll have games where he just goes off, but it'll be so inconsistent. And for a veteran, I get it. He's a role player. I'm not expecting him to be like this marks, like this. I guess, well, you do have players that can be marksmen, but for Evan Fournier, there has to be some baseline consistency that I know I'm going to get from him on a night-to-night basis, whether it's playmaking, whether it's team defense, some knockdown shots. We're not even getting any of that. You can't give a goose egg, man. You cannot give a goose egg and get paid the amount that you're paying. Now, this doesn't mean that it's a bad contract, because guys like Eric Bledsoe get traded like there's no tomorrow, and he is, in my opinion, not the best contract when he got extended by the Milwaukee Bucks. But yet somehow he finds himself on another team, whether it be the New Orleans Pelicans, whether it be now the LA Clippers. He just keeps game moved around, even though he is not that big of a contributor. And I feel the same way for Evan Fournier. And the argument for Evan Fournier is that he just doesn't fit on this team. He's not going to have that chemistry that we wanted him to have with Reggie Bullock. Just not happening. It should be more so with RJ, honestly. RJ should be that guy. So for Fournier, if you're trying to sell it to a team, be like, look, he just doesn't fit here. It was a bad signing, but we see his numbers from what he did in Orlando. He could possibly go help another team. Maybe someone like the Denver Nuggets who needs people. Maybe. Although they're in a cap hell right now, so I don't know if they really want to take him on. But that'd be like a situation you could say, hey, maybe you need an Evan Fournier on your team. You need another guy who can help and, be like second option, coming off the bench, third option in the starting lineup, and you don't really have to rely on him that much because you have Nikola Jokic. You could potentially say, we don't have Michael Porter Jr. Aaron Gordon is not necessarily that guy that can always generate offense for you. So why not have Evan Fournier in here, be that third, fourth guy between on and off, depending if him and Aaron Gordon go on, and if you get Jamal Murray back. So that's my thought process there. And the business case for moving Fournier, and they should do it sooner rather than later, is two reasons. One, you get RJ Barrett more touches. You saw what RJ was able to do today when he got more touches. Evan Fournier in the lineup only takes away touches from RJ Barrett. We're talking about a guy who's had a high usage rate when he was on the Orlando Magic, and that's for him to get going. And we saw that once again when RJ was out against the Boston Celtics. He needs a lot of touches. And quite honestly, I don't find Evan Fournier to be that effective in giving him most of the touches. It's not the guy we need to develop. We need RJ to develop. And we saw what RJ could do. So give him those touches. Move Fournier. Give him the touches. The other reason you move Fournier is because you get Quentin Grimes some good minutes. Quentin Grimes gives you better defense than this guy. And that lineup, that youth lineup that we saw today with Deuce McBride, Manuel Quickly, Quentin Grimes, Obi Toppin, Mitchell Robinson, I like that. Youth, guys ready to run, push, and they're athletic, high flying. Do it. Just that is what we should be seeing. Evan Fournier doesn't offer anything to this team. He needs to be traded. I hope the front office is looking at this and look, we got to move this guy. If you got to put an asset to him to move him, a second rounder, so be it. Because this guy, not cutting it. And it's nothing against Evan Fournier. He just doesn't fit here. He just does not fit here. You have to move him. Keeping him here to hopefully throw him into a future trade, I would get that if he was a little bit more consistent. He's not even consistent at this point where you're like, okay, I could see it coming, because it's just going to be like, all right, we have this good 5-game stretch from him. Then we go back to this stretch right now, which is just terrible. And we keep flip-flopping back and forth of what we're going to get with Evan Fournier, and he keeps taking touches away from guys that should be getting better touches. Like when Kemba comes back, I want to see him. I just want to see Kemba, RJ, Randle, those guys go at it. And what you really need is probably Quentin Grimes in there, a guy who doesn't need that many touches. Honestly, that way you can figure this whole thing out. And then we can discuss Deuce McBride later. Deuce is still learning some stuff too. I do like what I see in Deuce McBride. He's still very raw. I think he can offer you something when you're missing Derrick Rose. You can have him, Quickly, Burks, Toppin, and whatever center in that lineup. But guys, Fournier needs to go. And I think I think Knicks Nation can come together and agree. You can argue whether you like Randle on this team or not. You can argue whether RJ's good on this team or not. You can argue whether Tibbs is good for this team or not. I think the one thing that we can all come together on and say, M. Fournier has to go to a different team. He just does not fit here. He can go to another team and be successful somewhere else. Get him out of here. He just needs to go. If we can get a second rounder for this man, do it. Honestly, at this point, the value just keeps dropping and dropping and dropping. Hopefully, I can't remember who said this, who tweeted me at this. They said Fournier has red in his eyes when he plays against the Celtics. If that's the case, after the Celtics game, move this man. Seriously, move this man. Move this man after the 2 games we got against the Celtics. Raise that stock value, get the 2 second rounders called a day, bring up these other kids, because what is the reality that we got going on here? The reality is that we're not making a championship run. It's about winning championships in this league. In any sports league, it's about winning championships and maintaining competitiveness to be a championship team. You also got to develop talent in doing that. So why not maintain trying to be competitive, develop your youth that you have in RJ Barrett, Quentin Grimes, Deuce McBride. And you know you're not winning a championship anyway this year anyway if you're the New York Knicks. So why are we holding on to this guy? Just move him already. Like, he needs to go. Like, I wrote about how he needs to go. Dude, dope that you went on Knicks Fan TV, wanted to talk to the fans, answer questions, and so forth. Thank you. Thank you for your short time here. You got to go. Time's up. All right. Last thing I'll touch on before I do the slate. I mentioned on Knicks Fan TV the other day where this front office is hedging their bets. And this front office is hedging their bets. You know, everyone's saying, like, not everyone, but we have fractions of the same. We have fractions. Can't even think straight right now. It's too late. I'm tired. We have parts of the fan base where they want to move off of Randle. And I get that. They want the youth movement. Some are saying tanking. I disagree with that whatsoever. Tanking does not make any sense unless you're in a position like the Warriors, Raptors. We've had some good success. You rest your guys for one season. You go add top talent to that good talent that you have, and you go back to being competitive. We are not that. So that's where I say it doesn't make sense to take. However, in this sense, what I was saying is that this front office is hedging their bets. I don't think they initially wanted to hedge this. I think they wanted to go with youth because when you draft Obi Toppin, I think they were ready to move Julius Randle. Sure, we can go back to what that Woj podcast with Randle and whether it was JJ Redick's podcast, and he had that sit down dinner. I think it was a Woj podcast where they had the sit down dinner with, it was Worldwide West, Leon Rose, Alfred Payton, and Julius Randle having dinner, and they're asking, like, Randle, what do you need? And it's like, I need a coach that will hold me accountable. You know, XYZ, this, that, and the third. And they did that, and you could say it was for him. I don't necessarily think so. I don't know why you draft Obi Toppin, but they did that. And now with Randle's play last season, you had to reward him just to show around the league and him himself. Like, it's only just doing good business to reward a guy who was second team All NBA, most improved, made an NBA All-Star, took you from an irrelevant team to a relevant team, got you 41 wins, fourth seed in the Eastern Conference. You were able to host a playoff. You got one win. You know, he just did a lot for this team, was legit the engine for this team last season. You had to reward him. Took a discount, which is now not looking like a discount, which actually looks like the right price for him. And, you know, that was the cost of doing business. And with that now, I think the Knicks are like, well, we have to reward him. So how do we build around him while maintaining cap flexibility, while maintaining the youth, still trying to be competitive, still developing our own crop of young players, and trying to compete and win within this time, whatever window they have. You know, Leon Rose has a 6-year contract. So they have theoretically 6 years to be competitive, very competitive. And then they don't even have to win a championship. They just have to be really competitive. That way they can just all stick around. So you think that you have 6 years. This front office, in my opinion, is like, all right, so we'll do this Kemba thing. We'll do the Evan Fournier thing. We'll bring back the guys that were successful, also doing good business. When you bring back Nerlens Noel, you can argue about that contract. It's just, once again, doing good business. He was the anchor of the defense, top four in the NBA last season, defensive net rating. Like, you got to reward that, especially when it comes to a guy who was averaging like 2 blocks a game. Sure, he wasn't a good rebounder, but he really did anchor that defense. So you got to reward him. You reward Alec Burks for being that good bench player. Derrick Rose, reward him for being another good bench player. You get all these guys you rewarded. So it's just good business practice, and it kept continuity with this team. You add Kemba Walker, Evan Fournier, saying, hey, was try to take this offense up because we saw it wasn't really good last season, especially when we got to the playoffs. It was Randle out on island. We can't rely on Derrick Rose. We need somebody else. We need other guys in here who are going to develop. And we can't trust that. You can't trust that your young guys are going to take that next step. So that's why you also add these guys, because you can't be so crazy that you're like, oh, well, if RJ took this leap, he's going to take another leap, and then we don't even need them. So let's just bank on this guy. It doesn't necessarily work like that. And I get why you bring in veterans like an Evan Fournier, because you're once again hedging your bets. You're saying like, okay, we believe in RJ, but we don't know if it's going to happen this season. So why don't we get some insurance in case it doesn't, because we still need to be competitive. And you can't have your third-year player being so limited and trying to stay competitive. And the same thing with the bench, and same thing with the youth. You draft Quentin Grimes, Deuce McBride, Jericho Sims. You could look at them. Tibbs isn't getting a full look at them until they get into practice. And, that doesn't happen really until Summer League. He gets a short glimpse. Doesn't really get a glimpse until like September, October, once the season's about to start. So, you make all these signings in anticipation saying these young guys are not ready. But if the young guys are ready, that's when you go like, okay, we can move from this guy, like an Evan Fournier, because you actually do have the bench pieces that you need. So you have the Knicks who are hedging their bets by drafting young players who are showing that they're capable of providing some meaningful minutes. They're not complete projects. They're not complete players yet, but they can offer you a skill set that is useful right now in the NBA and for this team that's needed, whether it's 3-point shooting or just intense defense. And then you look at the veterans where you're like, all right, let's try to be competitive now. Let's try to go back into it. And they don't really know which way they want to go, because they're not looking to trade all their assets, and they're not looking to just go full youth movement either. So they're saying, the way it's looking right now, it's like, we'll wait for the right deal. If you can get someone like a De'Aaron Fox on a cheap, maybe we'll make that deal. And then we can say, we can trade, an IQ or an Obi Toppin and some draft picks, because we can still keep most of the youth and still go up another level. Trading for like Miles Turner, that makes sense, where it's like, you don't have to give up that much assets for Miles Turner. He's about to be a free agent. So the longer they wait to move him, his value just keeps dropping. So this front office is just really hedging their bets. They're like, if we can work around Julius, let's work around Julius. If not, and if you see someone like Obi Toppin just take that next level, they're probably like, look, we can move Obi Toppin and we still have a competitive team, and they're young. And it answers some contract questions as well. So that's what I think about this team. And that's what I think about this front office is really doing. I just want to talk it out a little bit more, especially for our listeners. All right. I've been talking for quite a while. Quite a while. I'm very impressed I've been talking for this long. I had a lot to get off my chest. All right, guys. So let's go down the slate and wrap it up. So we just defeated the Indiana Pacers, like I said, 104-94. The next time we will be back on here will be next. Actually, I don't know, because Jet season's over after this, so we'll work on when we're gonna come back on. But if we're talking about until next Wednesday, we got the Celtics twice and the Spurs before we get to the Dallas game. But I'll cover the Dallas game as well. Why not? So we'll play the Celtics, another struggling team. Got Jaylen Brown, Jason Tatum, who are leading that way. They don't really have an identity. They don't know if they want to be they're trying to be. I think they're trying to be an offensive team. I think Udoka is trying to have them as a defensive team, because that's what Brad Stevens was, even though he's still in there. You could say still is, because he's still around. But they haven't really found their identity. And I think the Knicks will get their revenge at home, and then they'll lose to them here in Boston, because that just seems to be the recipe for how this team goes. After that, you get the San Antonio Spurs. Knicks will be home against the Spurs. I think the Knicks will beat the Spurs. So the Knicks will be 2-1. Now, this is the tough one. Dallas will be home against the Mavs. And the Mavs are playing pretty well. Luka Doncic will be back. They're 19-8. They're not great, but they're starting to rack up some wins and play well. I think this is going to be a loss, guys. Something tells this to me about being a loss. I do think when they play them again down in Dallas, it will be a win for the Knicks because it will be Julius Randle's hometown, and he wants the ball out. But I think this one will be a loss. So the Knicks will go. They'll go 2-2, 2-2 on the week. They'll have gone 2-2 on the week, and that's my prediction. All right, guys, those are my predictions. Covered a lot today. Thank you for all tuning in for another Knicks episode of the Knicks, Jets, Etc. podcast. You know what to do. If you listen to this podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify, please make sure to give us a 5-star review and to leave a comment. If you don't listen to us there, it's okay. We're on Google Play, Amazon Alexa, Stitcher, you name it. We're all over the place. On top of that, we're also on YouTube. Check out the YouTube channel, Knicks, Jets, Etc. Make sure to subscribe. When you watch a video, hit that like button. And make sure to hit that notification bell so you know when a new episode drops. Also, while you're over there, we got Winning Picks Weekly. Video producer Greg and John go down the NFL slate. They're going to go down this last week and give you their takes on which games to bet. They've been doing a phenomenal job. And after the NFL season's done, they're going to get into the NBA season. So stay tuned for that. Last and certainly not least, please make sure to follow us on all social media platforms, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. All right, guys. I'll catch you later. Thank you all for tuning in for another Knicks episode of the Knicks, Jets, Etc. podcast. Catch you later this week for the last Jets preview, where the Jets take on the Buffalo Bills to wrap up the 2021-2022 season of the New York Jets. All right, everyone. Catch you later. As my boy would say, let's go Knicks.